Good afternoon and welcome to Biztech Asian Midday Marketwatch. Our guest today is Vishnu Varathan, Head of Economics and Strategy at Mizuho Bank in Singapore. Vishnu, happy Monday. How are you?
Happy Monday, sir. Always good to be here, and I'm doing okay, I think.
Now, before we get your insights, I want to take a look at, there's a lot of movement always on crypto markets over the weekend. Let's see how they're performing. Bitcoin is at 47,873.5. It's down 0.57%. So the market cap for Bitcoin is now 900 billion. Ethereum is at 3,162.81. It's down 0.47. So just to put it in context, Ethereum is about a third at 370 billion. Looking on at regional markets, it's a sea of green. We've got the Nikkei, which is at 27,760. It's up 0.43%. The Shanghai Composite is at 3,534. It is up 0.34%. The Hang Seng is at 25,495. It's up 0.35%. The ASX 200 is up 0.14%. It's 7,498.6. The Kospi is up 0.23% at 3,141. Closer to home, we've got the SGX, which is at 3,106.39, up 0.83%. Rounding up the numbers, we've got the FBM KLCI over at Bursa Malaysia at 1,563.94. It's up 0.24%. Vishnu, what's your view on what's market performance like this morning across markets?
Well, it does appear that post-Jackson Hole markets sort of decided that they're not really in a hole anyway, and that I think gave a little bit of optimism, particularly given how finely tuned the message was. Whilst it did not deviate away from taper, and that's a great part to it, because then you won't get the pessimists worrying about growth recovery not coming through. So he did hold on to the growth recovery, hence taper. But equally, there were a lot of caveats thrown in, particularly given how they want to look at incoming data and lingering the evolving risks, to use their words. I think the biggest thing for the markets was the fact that explicitly Jerome Powell decoupled taper from rate hikes. So essentially he said starting it or even ending taper doesn't necessarily mean that rate hikes will follow imminently. So I think markets took that as a signal for risk on, for prolonged accommodation on the monetary policy front, and that's boosting a lot of equities. You also get a weaker dollar, which means that accentuates the price effect on dollar-denominated assets, including commodities.
Okay, so if it's a risk-on scenario, given the challenges in China and the rotation out of China stocks, would you see that the investors would take a different view on that then?
I think any signs of a different view would particularly be due to bargain hunting or opportunistic moves. Either that or someone who's really knowledgeable, knowing which niche to get into. But for any investor taking a strategic view on this, rather than a very quick tactical move, would be aware that it doesn't spell the end of any of China's regulatory risks, or further down the road, escalating US-China tensions that is very difficult to dismiss. So for those reasons, China risks remain on board. But I think right now, markets are just taking relief wherever they can. And the fact that the latest China news was with regards to credit easing rather than regulatory tightening, I think markets are not complaining. And it's we'll cross that bridge when we get to it kind of policy for today.
Now, Vishnu, I noticed something interesting, that oil firms have slashed their Gulf of Mexico output by 91% ahead of Hurricane Ida. Now, how is this going to have an impact on oil markets in the near term?
I think we will find the impact will be a little bit mixed, because we will find that some of this will be absorbed by the fact that there is enough crude stockpiles to see through some of the refineries, and also the offsetting factor of markets anticipating a weaker driving season or weaker demand in the US. But equally, the very, very short-term supply disruptions and activity disruption will probably cause crude oil prices to go a little bit higher rather than not. What we really need to watch closely for is whether we have got any overriding pessimistic headwinds from emerging data, whether it is from the US or from China.
Now, last week, the events that were dominating markets was, of course, Jackson Hole. What events and data points should we be looking at this week that will move markets?
Well, this week, I think regionally, if we cast our eye around, there's quite a bit to look at. You've got India's Q2 GDP coming out. That's very backward looking, but I think nevertheless, the details will be poured over to see exactly where and what type of weakness lingers and what the what the outlook probably would shape up like. Australia is also releasing Q2 GDP, and you've got US. You've got a whole host of data coming. I think that there'll be a lot of focus on ISM numbers in the US and PMI numbers in China, because just not too long ago, before we got captured by Jackson Hole, the focus was really on whether we are seeing a slowing economic recovery momentum in US and China, and if so, to what extent. So those questions will re-emerge as we look at the details of these data points.
Now, Vishnu, as always, thank you very much for your insights.
My pleasure.
Now, we've been speaking to Vishnu Varathan, Head of Economics and Strategy at Mizuho Bank in Singapore, on Biztech's Asian Midday Marketwatch. I'm Brian Fernandez. Please check out www.biztech.asia for business and technology conversations. Please like and subscribe to our various platforms as well. Thank you very much for tuning in.